Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going into some material that's a bit different for us. It's highly abstract, I'd say, very spiritual, and actually surprisingly personal. We're looking at excerpts from the book Awakening the Tribes by Rabbi Jor Moshe Kasudo. So unlike our usual deep dives into, hard data or policy, this book is all about the architecture of identity and destiny. And so our mission here really is to unpack what I think is the central claim of this text, and it's poetic, sure, but it's also, you could argue, pretty radical. The idea that the human soul carries this ancient memory of who it is, a memory that survives for, 2,000 years of history and huge geographical separation. We want to understand not just what the author is claiming, but how he tries to back that up.
And what's so fascinating right from the very beginning is the immediacy of it. This isn't being presented as some historical theory about what was. It's framed as an active commentary on what's happening right now. The core idea is that this ancient identity is not just a relic, it's living inside the soul, and it survives centuries of cultural assimilation. The book says the dispersed tribes are, and this is a direct quote, not lost, but that they're in the middle of this great global awakening. The author even says this isn't just a book, he calls it a calling.
Okay, so let's start with the historical context then, because I think the sheer timeline here really sets the stakes. The book roots this whole idea, the spiritual memory, in the great scattering event from over 2 millennia ago, when the ancient tribes of Israel were dispersed all over the globe. That dispersion is
The crucible.
right, where this memory was supposedly forged.
Exactly. And the source, it really details the absolute severity of that dispersion. We're not just talking about moving to a new neighborhood. The author lays out these, 3 mechanisms that basically guarantee the loss of any outward identity. You have forced exile, you have intentional migration, really, really far from their homeland. And then this is the crucial part, total absorption. Over just a few generations, these descendants became completely integrated into totally different cultures, religiously, linguistically, everything.
And this is where the big intellectual challenge comes in, because if you go with the conventional wisdom that identity is a social construct, that it's learned and passed down, then after 2,000 years of being completely cut off, no shared language, no rituals, no community, that identity should be gone, utterly extinguished. And yet the mystery the source presents is that even when all the outward signs of Judaism vanished, the soul's memory of Israel remained.
It's a really profound counter-argument to that whole idea of constructivism. The book is basically making a case for a kind of spiritual resilience, an immutable internal self that is somehow immune to all those historical pressures of exile and assimilation. It's almost like the soul has its own spiritual DNA. So this memory, it isn't passed down in a classroom or through family rituals. It's deeper. It's just waiting for the right moment to come to the surface.
Okay, so if this memory is immune to history and geography, where is the author actually finding the evidence for this awakening? The text gives this fascinating list of locations that I think really highlight the global reach of this idea. It mentions remote villages in Africa, hidden communities deep in Iran.
And even up in the Andes Mountains.
Exactly. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
And I think that emphasis on geographical distance is very strategic. It's meant to stress that this can't just be explained away by, recent history or the internet. If you find a community in the Andes with these strange customs, thousands of miles and thousands of years away from the Levant, well, that claim of spiritual persistence suddenly sounds a lot more compelling than if he's just talking about communities in, say, modern-day Brooklyn.
Right. But how does this memory even manifest? It can't be that people are suddenly reciting Hebrew prayers they've never heard, right? The text seems to describe it as something more subtle, a quiet, unexplainable pull.
That's the key distinction. The author suggests it shows up not as knowledge, but as intuition. It might be a cultural tradition in some remote tribe, maybe an unusual reverence for a day of rest, or some dietary custom that just happens to mirror ancient Jewish law, even though they have no context for it. It's often described as this kind of constant low-level internal hum, a gravitational pull toward Jewish spirituality or toward Israel itself without any logical reason.
I found that idea of the unlearned calling to be really striking. These individuals, the source says, are sensing a sacred truth, a call that just won't fade, even though they have, and I'm quoting here, no rabbi, no synagogue, no one to guide them. They're awakening to a memory they never consciously learned, a spark they never chose. So the discovery is entirely coming from within.
Absolutely. And that self-generated discovery, well, it raises a really critical question that the book has to deal with. How does the author differentiate this specific soul memory from just general spiritual seeking
Mm-hmm.
or from simple confirmation bias. And that's where his whole methodology comes into play.
Okay, let's look at that. We're shifting into the book's structure now. The author, Rabbi Dror Moshe Kasuto, he's presented as someone blending ancient teachings with prophetic insight. That sounds pretty conceptual. Can you break down what that means in practice?
Sure. It means he isn't just relying on dry history or anthropology. So when he says ancient teachings, he's drawing on classical Jewish thought things that talk about the Messianic era, the return of the dispersed tribes, spiritual unity, stuff you'd find in Midrashic or even Kabbalistic texts. And the prophetic insight part, that's him applying that ancient framework to what's happening today. He sees these modern awakenings not as random events, but as part of a divinely orchestrated process of redemption playing out over millennia.
So the ancient texts give him the theory.
And the modern events provide the proof.
Right. And that brings us to the most concrete evidence he offers, the 10 real-life testimonies. Given that this entire claim is about a spiritual memory, these testimonies feel like the critical anchor for the whole book. What do they actually offer?
This is the part that really grounds the whole thing. The testimonies aren't just little anecdotes. They're detailed stories from people all over the world who, with no prompting, had this spontaneous recognition. They often talk about dreams or a single moment of just profound, inexplicable realization about their spiritual heritage.
And are these historical accounts, or are they from today?
Oh, they're very much contemporary. They're documenting souls trying to return in our lifetime. A really common thread is that they felt this deep pull before they ever encountered any formal Jewish teaching or community. So, for example, someone might describe feeling this compulsion to observe a certain day of rest or to light candles on a Friday night, only to find out later that it mirrors Shabbat, which they'd never even heard of. This is presented as proof that the memory came before the learning.
That does make the evidence stronger. It kind of bypasses the argument that they just read a book and decided to convert. The pull was there first, so the testimonies are like snapshots of the awakening itself. They map that internal journey.
Precisely. And that's also why the book is designed to be a roadmap. It offers what it calls a gentle but powerful roadmap for anyone who feels that internal pull, to help them rediscover their spiritual origin. It guides them through reflections on identity, faith, struggle, and finally redemption. It offers a path no matter how far away the soul has wandered.
So let's use those criteria and speak directly to you, the listener. This brings us to section 4. Who is this book for? The author isn't just talking to people interested in religion. He's addressing a very specific internal profile of what he calls the wandering soul. The text says it's explicitly for anyone who feels drawn to the Jewish faith or to Israel, but has no idea why they feel that way.
It's really targeting anyone who feels a kind of spiritual dissonance, the feeling of being in the right life, but maybe the wrong identity. The book is for anyone who searches for their place, their people, or deeper purpose, or senses a sacred calling inside them, but can't put a name to it. It's about validating those feelings of profound dislocation.
And the source material gets even more specific about the internal longings it wants to address. It's speaking directly to you if you've ever felt a pull toward Jewish spirituality, or a longing to speak to God in your own words, not just reciting prescribed prayers, or maybe a mysterious, persistent connection to Israel, your ancestors, or your destiny that you just can't explain.
Right. And these aren't presented as intellectual curiosities. They're presented as the data points of the soul. The central idea is that these powerful, often unspoken emotional needs are actually the evidence. They're the proof that this ancient memory is finally surfacing. The book's entire purpose is to say to the reader, you're not making this up. You're listening to your own history.
And then it delivers what has to be the core reassuring message. The book does not ask you to become anything. It helps you remember who you already are. That framing just completely changes the game. It shifts it away from an external process like religious conversion to one of deep internal self-recognition.
Exactly. It removes the burden of having to create a new identity and replaces it with the joy of discovering one. If the identity is already there inside you, the process is one of uncovering, not constructing. And that's the profound assurance the author gives to that wandering soul. You aren't lost. You just need a guide back to your own memory.
It really is a beautiful synthesis of the conceptual and the deeply personal.
So if we just synthesize the main point of this deep dive, the book is really proposing a definition of identity that's totally independent of culture or environment or even history. Identity, according to Rabbi Kasuto, lives in the soul. This memory lasts for centuries across all these different cultures, and he asserts it starts to rise again precisely when the world is ready for it. The tribes are not lost. They are actively awakening, and their stories are being written right now.
That's an incredible thought to leave you with. For those who might be interested in this roadmap, the source notes that Awakening the Tribes is available in paperback. It's described as a high-quality print, about 109 pages. It certainly encourages you to consider that profound journey home that the author describes.
And here's a final provocative thought that really builds on this whole concept of spiritual memory. We've explored this idea that a collective spiritual identity can survive for 2,000 years across cultures, and then just surface through spontaneous recognition. If that's true for a group, what other hidden memories or personal identities or destinies stretching back through your own ancestors could be waiting inside you right now to be awakened? What forgotten truth, independent of anything you learned in school or from your family, might be trying to define your future? Something to think about long after the physical signs of that history have faded.